Welcome, it's the Market Sniper, an economic take. Diary of the CEO has Gary Stevenson and Daniel Priestley on. Gary Stevenson is a recently going viral YouTube channel that's now through 800,000+ subscribers and advocates for taxing the rich on the basis that his legacy experience with his father being a postman, his mother not working, they were able to own their home, retire in a fully paid home, and the current generation can't own their home. And the correlation equals causation argument that he comes up with is taxes were higher as a post office while his dad was working in the post office, which would have been very low. And as a result, that's why they had the ability on a single earner as a sole postman to have a working class but still affordable existence where they could have a holiday and a decent life. That is essentially the basis of his argument. He refers to it regularly. He also gets exceedingly emotive and says, yeah, we're all millionaires and never mind, then we'll just leave it all as it is and everyone else can suffer. So whenever there's a line of argument that he doesn't like, that is exposing his lack of understanding of financial systems, despite being a maths genius that's won every maths prize he's ever participated in and still needing to cheat in a poker game to become a major player or a trader in a bank that saw him get 7-digit sums in bonuses as a trader and be the most profitable trader in a particular year, punting, utilizing the very system that he seems to criticize. So he's benefited from it. His dad has a gold-plated pension from the good old pension era, where statists took much lower workers, took much lower salaries, but ended up with gold-plated pensions that continued to increment up with inflation for every year thereafter that they worked their long-term job for. And that was a time when people worked for one company and worked their entire life for that company. That's Gary. Daniel is an entrepreneur, sees everybody as having an opportunity, wants more economic freedom, wants smaller government, sees government as the least effective spender of money, which is, in my view, 100% correct and accurate, and actually has some serious facts. The concern with this debate is that Daniel has to continually educate Gary on the difference between inheritance tax, capital gains taxes, and income taxes. There seems to be even a complete lack of understanding of how they function, and that if you actually get overly harsh on taxing corporations, they re-domicile elsewhere, they utilize transfer pricing, they can do whatever they want to move a la Dublin. That doesn't make it right, by the way, but he doesn't understand that in actual fact billionaires, which usually are billionaires for owning corporations, will have incredibly effective tax avoidance, tax reduction means. This Gary blames on capitalism, when in actual fact we're in a cacocracy where we have an oligarchy of tech companies. Both Daniel and Gary failed to see or state that in actual fact these are real created monopolies, which have also got very fat and rich on a number of mechanisms, which has included statist expenditure. Statist expenditure for a surveillance finance system. Amazon runs the AWS servers for the military industrial complex, so does Microsoft. Google and Samsung, all these devices are spying on us perpetually, doing maps so that we are tracked, all in the name of giving us great service and safety, and at the same time harvesting our data. So the great appetite for data and governmental surveillance has been provided by the technological oligarchy that neither actually point out, that have benefited, that all seem to be dark state funded and been sold to you as amazing entrepreneurs that started these unicorn businesses in Californian dorms or garages. None of them actually brought into light that they have benefited immensely from state expenditure and state subsidy, which includes also, of course, Tesla, that received in Q3 of 2024 $738 million and similar amounts each time in carbon credits based off a climate crisis lie. That is also a statist subsidy coming from a government state which is being handed over to an oligarchical entrepreneur who is actually really a frontman for the legacy family money, and is not running 9 different businesses, becoming the best gamer in the world in whatever particular game he plays with, while twiddling his joystick, and having 14 kids from 4 different women, none of them organically, or apparently 2 organically, let's just say. The rest are all lab babies, whilst also working out how he's going to stick a chip in everybody's brain. If you want to believe that is a totally organic single person entrepreneur, who's also on Twitter all the time, responding in every possible way and having his excess Tesla stock that he can't afford to sell burned so that he can make the claims on the insurance company, given the collapse in the economy that he's part creating through the cuts that are needed, by the way, for the Biden administration, that continue to hire to deny and denounce the fact that they were in a recession when they were in a recession, but kept hiring so many cultural Marxist statist people into government-based jobs that they masked the fact that there was any real unemployment by crowding out and becoming an ever greater government, in that way trending more towards Europe. And now that those cuts have to take place, we're going to have a circling in collapse. So there's a lot going on here, as you can imagine, from that opening diatribe. Unfortunately, the chairman doesn't involve himself too much in the discussion for particularly points of order, because Gary is firing regular questions at Daniel whenever he's trying to make a point, in a kind of harassing the witness kind of way that allows him to build up any momentum, and should have been reined back to allow someone to actually make his case. So it's kind of a frustrating debate that doesn't leave you with too much, apart from the fact that Gary is under-equipped, apparently has written a book, hopelessly under-equipped on understanding where the Duke of Westminster actually gets his money, and that inheritance tax is an entirely different tax, and is money that has already been taxed, by the way, versus income tax, that which you take for your daily living from the course of your activities. So in that sense, it's almost like somebody who's reasonably well and too well equipped having to teach somebody who his argument keeps reverting back to highly emotive crises of working class people not being able to buy houses. Dear Gary, working class people can't buy houses for a number of reasons, particularly in the UK, but generally. The overall buying power of money has been eroded away entirely by the central banking cartel that are actually funding you. Gary is funded by open democracy, whatever that means. I'm very suspicious of Quango societies that have this tax the rich, because it isn't the real rich, it ends up the middle class, as you know, as we've explained. And very quickly inflation will make a super tax. Let's remind everybody about the 40% super tax that was brought in Britain, which was really just for the few rich people, and now a nursing sister of 20 years actually qualifies for the 40% tax margin. So would a moderately ranked policeman. That was never the intention, but don't worry, inflation will ensure all you people end up in there. In the meantime, Google meets with George Osborne over the Super Bowl and negotiates a fraction of 1% to pay. Apple is paying approximately that. Why? Because they're harvesting data, cooperating with the Five Eyes, the Secret Service agencies, hoovering up all your data, packaging it up, and selling it on the back end while giving you free services. By the way, if a social media is ever free, you are the product. Please understand that. And the product is your data, and that data is being occasionally leaked. And obviously, governments have backdoors to assess whatever they need, in part and parcel of learning to manage you, the cattle, in the system. Other humans see themselves as farmers and you as the cattle, so that they can know where you are, what you're doing, and everything about you, scrape your biometrics and do all that they need, so that unruly citizens can be culled. That's right. Of course, let's not forget the CV19 event, where I didn't see either of these people speak out against what was absolutely a draconian lockdown and a very, very toxic event that led to a massive mass genocide. So with all this hand-wringing and morality, and I'm doing it for the people, I'm already rich, I can go retire and drink pina coladas in Bali, that we keep hearing from Gary, his solutions are incredibly poorly thought out. He's not run the numbers on what 1%. He has no idea of how many billionaires there are in the UK. There's not that many, by the way, Gary. And if you apply a tax above 10 million on a marginal basis at 1% above that, which is his primary thesis, you will get surprisingly little. Also, let's just remember that Keir Starmer is already immensely turning the screws on taxation and cuts at the same time, which is part of a right-sizing exercise for an already hopelessly over-indebted government that has created too much fiat and destroyed your buying power, which brings us back to the original point as to why working class people can't get onto the property ladder. You now need two incomes to have a decent shot, and one of them needs to be a big earning job of some variety, because valuations have been allowed to escalate due to a financialization of everything, Gary, which is part and parcel of the banking system, like Citibank that you worked for, that actually by creating financialization, by being part of the corporate cabal of bankers that borrowed lots of additional money into existence, actually created a boom cycle. Because most people are using leverage now to buy properties, and if that leverage didn't exist and everyone was paying cash, the prices would in fact be substantially less, and you would never have had the boom and bust. And who gets killed in the bust? It's always the poor that don't understand the rules of the game. Part of your job is to help people better understand the rules of the game, rather than create a politics of envy that says, hey, working class guy, that guy that's got a little bit more than you should be taxed a whole bunch more. Well, the good people leave, and that's what Daniel is trying to explain, and they can run their businesses. And Gary says, why should we let them leave and go be in Dubai? Because freedom, Gary. Guess what? If we don't want to live in that country, we should be allowed to immigrate. Is Gary going to stop people from immigrating from countries that have bad policies, shit weather, terrible health services, super expensive property, and financially leveraged assets that they can't afford, while not being afforded the same access to that leverage so that they can get in the property ladder? Dear Gary, you're about to turn the United Kingdom into a prison. Oh dear, they're not allowed to leave. Wow, now I've actually heard it all. As I say, it's a little bit like a 5-year-old being allowed to talk too much at the adults' table in terms of how the system works, and is deeply frustrating. But don't take it from me on my old ranty monologue. Let's hear a little bit about it. After all, I've been jabbering on for a bit. Let's see a little bit of the debate. I've listened to 2/3 of it so that you don't have to, and it's a real frustrating watch. Here we go.
I've got a question for both of you, which is, if you are a young person and you're 18 years old now, and that you're listening to this, but your objective really is an individualistic one, you want to get rich and you have a great future for you and your family, like all of us have been able to do, what would your advice be to them, Gary, at this moment in time?
This is such a hard question. I know Dan's angry at me for I put in my video how to get rich. Somebody came around to my house and asked me this the other day. Obviously, I get asked it a lot because, stupidly, I'm very public about the fact that I'm rich. What I did is not replicable. It's not. I'm sorry, but it's not. People always say, why don't you teach me to trade? Like, it's hard. It's hard trading, and it's dangerous. And I think a lot of young men are getting sort of sold into...
This is not the question I wanted. Let's go back further and hear some of the typical rancor that we were getting from Gary, just to make it clear that it's not, I'm not mischaracterizing this poor individual.
I want to take us back to a point you were talking about earlier, which is about personal agency, because I would like you, Daniel, to give the counter to your own argument, because I want to make sure when we talk about solutions to this problem, start a business, be entrepreneurial, you can also understand how that works for people with our brains and our mindset and whatever we had that made us do that, our risk appetite, our trauma, whatever it might be. But not everybody is wired in such a way. So that's not necessarily the best solution for everyone.
I've got to come in on this question. So by the way, it's not our responsibility to ensure the evenness of outcomes. If you aren't wired that way, you don't want to run a business, you want to do some mundane job, like work in the post office for a while, and I'm not all jobs are mundane, I'm not knocking getting a job, doctors, surgeons, there's some incredibly high value jobs, but if you want to do the postman pat that Gary's dad did which means stamp sort, very mundane things that actually now can almost easily be done by robots and AI. There's a lack of ambition in there, and you're not entitled to a particular outcome. All of us are created equal in rights, but not equal in ambition, capability. And you only really need one winner entrepreneur every 100 or even 10,000 at the big level to create an immense amount of jobs for a lot of people to do pretty interesting things, pretty interesting work, have a bit of initiative, and be able to make a meaningful contribution in a business, right the way through to some people doing pretty mundane tasks. And you get to choose where you are. And you aren't entitled, especially if you choose Postman Pat, to everything that the person that is doing something far higher value add is. And it's really not Daniel's responsibility to justify or create an environment where everybody gets to make a serial entrepreneur, a successful serial entrepreneur's money for just wanting to do something mundane and not putting in too many hours.
Also, we sit here with a bit of hindsight bias where we were lucky and it worked out for us.
Yeah.
When you look at the stats around businesses succeeding, the stats, it's like 90% of businesses fail.
Yeah.
So most of them are failing. The ones that emerge from that, people like me, then we have a bias where we go, well, it worked for us, and you can do it too. I don't come from money, so I have the same bias. Like I watched.
Well, I've built from scratch several times because I got disrupted several times. So I've had to start with nothing several times and build.
Key point. You keep showing up, you lose. You keep showing up, you lose. It's called determination. It's called relentlessness. It's called energy. It's called refinement. It's called learning and growing. And you take the boom and bust and the boom and bust until you learn how to boom without the bust. And actually, people that take that amount of risk deserve everything they get. Anybody who is a small government libertarian. Let's go into some of the comments. There were some interesting points made in the comments actually while Daniel is dealing with us. In 1900, 90% of Americans were self-employed. Now it's about 2%. It's called consolidation. Strengthen governments and corporations, weaken individuals. With taxes, this can be done imperceptibly over time. Leo Gold. Yeah, that's right. Go back to an environment where more people do work for themselves, by themselves, and charge a fair fee and get validated by people contracting them. In short, you eat what you kill. It's called hunter. If everybody wants to be a farmer inside somebody else's business who was a hunter, they can't expect the same level of rewards. And we've gone too far from having hunters to lots of socialist and soft jobs that actually have questionable value for the overall society. Do we need transgender condom consultants, for example? Maybe, maybe not. There's been a lot of cultural Marxist recruitment recently, as I've referred to, in the Biden government, throwing out jobs for all and sundry, just for the sake of keeping heat in an economy so that they didn't have a recession, because the unemployment didn't show up until suddenly it does in a far bigger way, and a lot more waste needs to be cut out of the government. Of course, the average person's response is very much in this category. Just finished the interview. I'm guessing the massive support of Gary's points. I'm deeply saddened that anybody thinks that Gary is the most supported person. He's the most ill-equipped. He's been exceedingly narrow. He's a trader, which I am too, by the way. So there's no harm or wrong in being a trader. And he's expressed his view, and he had access to a massive amount of capital and balance sheet to build the wealth he has so that he can now trade privately. Goes to show just how much regular people are struggling to survive due to living standards collapsing. For the middle class and the poor, Gary is not going to save us. We have to save ourselves by working together to demand change. Well, it depends what change you really want. Do you want Gary's change, tax the richer than you more, which will be the middle class? Let's be clear. I'd love to take 50% of Elon Musk's wealth away from him, but you're actually taking Rockefeller frontman's wealth, and they don't allow that. In short, the corporations, the Googles of this world, they are deeply owned. They're owned by BlackRock. They have 100% chosen one board. You aren't getting in there to confiscate from them. You aren't getting to the billionaires, the trillionaires. Yes, they're trillionaires. Families, even though you don't know, you think Elon's the richest guy. Okay, carry on. You think Bill Gates is the second, whoever you think, followed by Warren Buffett. And it's amazing to me, actually, on that point, how many people think the most richest people are this single generation. You know, they made it all themselves in this generation. There's never been any meaningful wealth created that's been handed down multiple generations. I mean, that would be the obvious choice, but no, that doesn't happen. You're never told about that happening. It's all this first generational wealth. These are your richest people. I mean, it's absolutely absurd, and none of the legacy families of wealth, that topic never gets touched on Diary of the CEO. You can rest assured that isn't going to happen. They're too normie for that. But anyway, not everyone is meant to be an entrepreneur, but even being a teacher should be valuable enough that one doesn't have to struggle to pay the bills. Well, it used to be enough, but then you let the banking cartel and the private banks and the central banks, along with the commercial banks, do a proliferation financial leverage experiment of liquidity. Those same teachers never understood the game, so they never participated in it unless they had already bought at least one house that they used, and that turned out to be the most valuable asset that they had. Many of them not realizing that maybe if they'd bought more houses during that boom period when initial financial leverage was being applied, they could have ridden the wave. That's called entrepreneurship. That's called understanding the game. We shouldn't need to have to apologize for people that participate in a game they don't understand and end up failing. Nobody should. I don't get to play chess against the grandmaster and say it's unfair that he properly fucked me up. I don't understand. I haven't put the amount of work in. He gets it far more. He's thinking 6 moves ahead. I don't even know what each piece does. I have to think it through. Listen, Real Madrid beats a Cabbage Patch football team 15-0 every day without measure. And it shouldn't be any different. So this whole notion that teachers, that they should have a valid income, yes, I agree with that. It's a valuable societal role. But that does not give them right to wealth. It does not give them right to wealth. They should have a reasonable living standard, and they would have if the financial leverage merchants or proliferate central banker cartel were brought to task for what they do. The inherent policy of central banks is inflationary. They admit it. He worked for one. He should know it. He shows no recognition that the central bank's policy is an inflationary one, which actually means proliferation and devaluation of fiat. Now, when you compound a very small number over many, many years, you end up with the fact that the dollar has lost 98% of its buying power against a universal asset that flies at the same elevation. In short, every currency has jumped out of the gold plane and has capitulated. And in actual fact, they all want plaudits for saying they predicted this crash. The crash that's inevitable, the crash that is coming, that's taking you into reset. They all want to say, I told you so in retrospect. Gary doesn't stop saying he's been right for 15 years. I don't know what he's being right about. The fact that if you over-proliferate fiat, the money stops buying stuff. You end up with reduced growth for every dollar you buy in. And slowly the tricks that you pull leads to an eventual debt crisis. I didn't see his call in 2020 after COVID saying the bond market would collapse. And he was a bond market and interest rate trader in the subprime period. Sorry, Gary, never saw it. Didn't hear it. We made it, and it's clear. And the debt and fiat funding system is in failure. He is right about the collapse, and no amount of entrepreneurship is probably going to save that. But nonetheless, that's not a reason to stop trying. By the way, the policies of the UK are worse than America, and Americans blame their government, whilst in the UK, in a classist system obsessed by class, they blame the class strata above them. Well, the middle class family with 2 doctors and a bigger family house in a slightly nicer area is not the guy that's been the undoing of teachers not getting onto the property ladder. It's time they looked at the legacy families. It's time they looked at the central banking cartel. It's time they looked looked at the proliferation and the devaluation of fiat as the real reason, Gary, why your post office dad could afford a home and now a teacher can't. It's the leverage. It's the hypervaluation brought about by leverage, brought about by money being borrowed into existence so that asset prices could be chased up. That meant you either were on and you got the ride, or you weren't and you missed it. That's why the next generation can't get on, Gary. They never had homes in utero, and they will only get on if their parents leave to them, for which inheritance taxes and those on farms are now happening. And I'd love Gary to explain why he has no criticism for the fact that BlackRock has bought 50,000 homes. That's right, Chosen One only bought BlackRock, which is the buyer of last resort, has been buying British homes. You're talking about a US corporation. Why does Britain have no unicorns? Because it's actually been through the venture capital formation of New York and California that has seen any great tech company like ARM end up being bought and part of a Mag 7 corporation. And why are the Mag 7 corporations doing so well? They've also had that proliferation cash being pumped into them for all the data that they're stealing of you and I for the government, all the server farms they've built, all the scale businesses they've bought that had bottomless overdrafts like Amazon that ran 15 years without ever making a profit, great accounting, and are never broken up by the EU or anyone, despite lots of hand-wringing in the EU for their exceedingly low taxation that they truly pay. They are protected. They pay the politicians. They buy them NFL Super Bowl tickets. They agree dirty deals. It's different for them. You will end up paying Gary's taxes. Google will never. Apple will never, and the billionaires and multimillionaires and even the senior managers that have special consultancy clauses and agreements that work remotely all the way around the world and can choose to live in Dubai instead of Britain, that can choose to live in Panama, that can choose to live or work out of corporations that are based there, never will they. If you don't understand the rules of the game and you don't prioritize learning them and deciding to be wealthy and making difficult choices so that you can win in the game, you end up being the teacher who can't afford a home, and at the end of the day it was your choice. You chose teaching, and I love teachers and I'm glad they're teachers, by the way, but you could start a teaching business. You could go offshore if you want real ambition. If you choose to work for government, you get everything that goes with it. You get a government employee, and you've actually had, in most instances, incredibly generous pensions that are now so onerous that Gary's post office dad is causing debt-based problems for the next generation, which is why in the last video I felt that Gary's dad's pension should be renegotiated for the fact that he was given the opportunity to get on the property ladder before all the financial engineering ended and got paid his final salary, a final salary scheme, till the day he dies with an inflation index, and all that cost is put on the next generation. That is why you end up with the whole experiment now ending. Proliferation, bad decisions made largely by government to appease and make the boomer generation happy in that time, and the bill eventually gets passed on and needs paying. Dear Gary, my goodness, you have no understanding for someone that traded interest rates and bond markets for Citibank. You have no understanding of who the central bank, the commercial banks, the primary dealers, and their epic role in creating everything, and you are trying to take down those people that lived in a slightly better area than you, that do slightly bigger jobs of slightly higher wage packets, because that's who will end up paying your taxes. Let's hear what Daniel says a little bit more in between rants.
But you started,
but I'm a certain type of person, right?
And when we say start from nothing, you actually started with a wealth of information, and the whole game in building
intellectual
business,
capital.
Intellectual capital, having been through it before, being around that mentor that gave you the information.
Also having access to a great market. Like having access to a free market is a big thing. I was born in Australia and I moved to London at the peak of London's economic freedom.
So this can't be broadly applicable advice, can it?
Well,
anyone can read. Anyone can go and decide to want a better life. Anyone can understand. YouTube is free. You can see that business people do better than people that choose to work for status jobs. If you don't want to do it and you don't want to look it up, you don't want to read Think and Grow Rich, never has so much content been so readily available. That doesn't mean it's easy. It doesn't mean it's easy, but there's almost you had privilege, you had intellectual capital, or you had a certain upbringing, or you were born in a certain country. The internet is largely available globally. And you can decide who your heroes are. You can watch football and your hero can be Zinedine Zidane, or you could have watched, like me, and read books about Warren Buffett and seen how someone accumulated wealth because you had an inherent interest in the compounding and building of wealth. If you don't have an interest in something, you just want it because it's kind of nice and convenient when it comes to pay for restaurant bills and nice things, you're not serious about becoming wealthy and nobody owes you it. People in Nigeria can access the internet. People in the townships of South Africa can now access the internet. You have to have the will, you have to have the drive, and you have to have a certain degree of relentlessness and a degree of intellectual capital. If you keep showing up, you will improve your life. Whether you'll become a multimillionaire in dollar terms is an entirely different thing. Your environment can be changed. I changed my environment. I had to leave my country. I needed just a job to survive while I built a business, and I couldn't even get it with an MBA and a CMT. So I left the country where I could get an immediate base salary and commission, and then inside of that, develop my first property business in expressing my trading view of a sustained Greenspan low interest rate environment where the assets would likely climb, and if I could secure them, I could have a company which bought entire sites and made landlording available to British people who wanted buy-to-lets. That's called business and entrepreneurship. It's also a trading mindset. That's how I did it in an environment where I couldn't even get employed because there were now reverse racism policies at the time that I was coming around and getting all my qualifications. So you may have to leave, which is why I say dispassionately to many people, if the environment is changing and is adverse, leave. Go somewhere where you'll be treated better to advance your own living standards. It is your own responsibility. The outcomes are your own responsibility. If you're not happy with the deal you're getting domestically, you should leave. The UK is turning down, and I continue to say to everybody in the UK, it is not becoming a conducive environment for people that want to uplift their life. You also missed the generation that got the big leverage up, the once-off moment of hyper leverage, and in fact, you're quite likely to see the downdraft of the deleveraging. It's worth leaving it. It's worth going somewhere else where you don't have to live in a downdraft environment. You don't have to live in an anti-entrepreneurial environment. That's some of my thoughts on this. Let's listen to Daniel, who also said economic freedom. Move to countries that have higher economic freedom. The great irony of the Zionist, the Marxist and the Nazi, the three drama triangles where the perp is always the Nazi, the Zionist and the Marxist are playing off against each other in a left versus right, Biden versus Trump drama triangle is one thing, but you can absolutely choose where you settle somewhere else so that you can get the chance, choose some place of economic freedom so that any opportunity you see to develop something small, let it start small, can actually be done. Let's hear Daniel a little more.
Well, I think personal agency is broadly applicable.
Yes,
the idea, I got this friend of mine who woke up one day, he went out clubbing, went out to a nightclub, felt sick, collapsed, woke up and they'd chopped off all four limbs, right? So he had quadruple amputee. He was 19 years old. So he wakes up in bed and he basically says, I'm a quadruple amputee. I was fine 48 hours ago, now I'm a quadruple amputee. And he decides to make this decision in the hospital room that this is going to be the best thing that ever happened to him. And he makes that decision. Right?
Even that is a consequence of him and his wiring. What I'm trying to understand.
Sorry, I'm afraid. Good for him for having the wiring to make something so challenging, which would have absolutely destroyed so many people, including me personally, and turn it into something that then made him a millionaire running clinics, etc., as the story then goes on to say. And that is wiring. If you are positive and you are going to work and you're hell-bent to be successful, those people deserved it. People that don't deserve the same outcomes. It's not equality of outcomes. This is a very communist jump in here by our Diary of the CEO friend. So what? It's his wiring. Well done. Well done to him for overcoming that.
He ended up starting a clinic, and it's a multi-million-dollar clinic.
Yeah.
I mean, it's incredible
He's
what
the
people
exception,
can do.
not the rule.
It's incredible what people. But you only need a few people to succeed, and the whole economy starts to improve. We actually in this UK, we only at the peak of our entrepreneurial blitzing it, where we're doing so well, there was only 40,000 scale-ups. 40,000 companies were creating jobs growth, higher wages, investment into the country.
And also on that point, most of them would have been small and medium enterprises. They're not the unicorns.
It's only 1% of people who pay 30% of the taxes and 10% of people who pay 60% of the taxes. So you only need 1 in 100 to actually create something that's valuable, and you get an extra 30% of taxes.
But so that again is, we need this one. That's advice for the people that end up getting into that 1%.
Yeah. But who does everyone else work for? Like, all jobs growth comes from entrepreneurs.
So what are you saying to the 99% there? Are you saying go get a job?
And the good thing about having that 1% of armless, legless people that make a massive clinic is they end up creating a lot of jobs for everybody else who doesn't have quite the same level of drive, but can still make massive contributions inside an organization created by the person with no limbs.
Well, you need wealth creators in the economy who are building something. Like, you take Gymshark. People who work at Gymshark, they're super glad that this guy started the company. They're really happy that there's a company. Otherwise, where would they go? What would they work? Where would they work? So if Ben decides that he doesn't want to start that company in the UK, or if he gets to 10 million and stops, then all of those additional jobs are toast. They're all gone.
So you encouraging the entrepreneurial, you're not encouraging everyone to become an entrepreneur. No. You're saying those that have that bias or that...
I'm saying we need a system that encourages the people who can to do.
And what about everybody else?
Well, the flow-on effect is that creates jobs, that creates wealth in the economy,
okay.
And free markets lift everybody up. Free markets just means that everyone's trading with everyone. It starts to, like, the whole thing. I mean, it's just a tale as old as time. As soon as economies are free and there are entrepreneurs starting things and growing things, everyone's life improves. Everyone's life gets better.
And what part of that do you disagree with, Gary?
I think it doesn't work. It doesn't work. The only period, listen, the last 70 years are not normal, Stephen. The last 70 years are not normal. The last 70 years in Europe and the US, where ordinary people like my dad could work for the post office on less than average wage and buy a house and support a family, it's not normal. It's not normal in the world, and it's not normal in history. Most countries in the world are not like that. Most countries have a small super rich elite and a very large group of extremely poor people. That's most of the country, and it's most of history in this country, and it's most of history in the US. Yeah, we talk about Charles Dickens. I read Hard Times, and this is written in the 19th century when Britain was like the industrial superpower of the whole world. And at the time, the government was talking about, should we tax these industrialists? And the industrialists were saying, if you tax us, we'll throw our factories into the sea. And it just reminds me, the only time we've ever really been able to provide decent living conditions for ordinary working people was the period after the war where we massively redistributed wealth. And now we're losing that holding of wealth in the middle class.
Can you acknowledge, though, that was a completely different time as it relates to being able to...
It was a different time, but, I could,
because of technology.
Nigeria today, Brazil today, the UK 300 years ago, France 200 years ago. There is only one specific time that we have ever successfully provided broad living standards for ordinary people. And it was a period of time we protected a broadly equal wealth distribution and taxed the rich at very high rates.
And you can acknowledge that that's extremely hard to do.
Taxing the rich at extremely high rates was not what brought about the increase in people's living standards. Technology, the Industrial Revolution, allowed for mass production, affordability of things that used to be handmade. That's what gave everybody a toaster, everybody a car, everybody the cost coming right down. That was a technological advance which is inherently disinflationary. That means deflation. It does the opposite of inflation. And the very thing that I say has stopped people from getting onto the property ladder is proliferation, which is inflationary and causes asset prices first to go up before your bread and your commoditized products, which are more scalable, made en masse, for which technology has applied, where previously you had an old man and a single horse plowing a field. Now you have combine harvesters, you have far bigger farms, far greater scale, and still only barely profitable commoditized market. But with all that technology, you get to make so many things disinflationary cheaper. And when you see the commodities starting to go up, what's going on in copper, which is only a semi-precious metal in truth, although they'll pull the copper wires out down the road here. They will treat it as, they will stockpile it in China as a semi-precious metal. It'll be used industrially everywhere. When you start to see the commodities going up, you know that the fiat proliferation has been so much that even the very technologically disinflationary produce of farming that has got technically better, more efficient, smarter, more scaled, has now reached all those advantages since that era that one man and his donkey pulling a plow on a subsistence farm done manually by hand and horse. All those advantages have now been blown away by the extent that the central banking cartel have introduced a tax and spend policy of proliferation of currency. That is a key point that is again being missed in this entire debate, and why I keep making it.
because the nature of the economy
100%,
is now different.
100%. That's the reason why all of our grandparents and our great-grandparents and our great-great-grandparents did poverty. And that's why I know I'm probably going to lose. And that's why I bet on the economy getting worse. And that's why I know poverty is going to increase, because it was extremely difficult to get that unusual...
We're all betting on the collapse. It's the debt system, Gary. You never said it once. You worked for the bank. They helped create it. They helped do it. Citibank is one of the primary dealers and major parts of the cabal, along with Goldman, Bank of America, and select European banks that are part of the debt proliferation scheme, along with the central banking cartel. You worked with them. You were part of them. You got given your huge capital balance that you now play with today as a private trader through being part on that team. You extracted off the citizens, and when they crashed, Gary, you saw them made whole and you kept your job by virtue of the toxic debt they sent from America into Europe. You got your privatized profits and you socialized the losses. Your business that you chose to work for socialized their losses on the people that saw a massive splurge of capital, QE 1, 2, 3, and 4, called Twist, that was all throughout a terrible recovery, inherently a depression caused again by the banking system cartel that you made all your money with and for, and now you're poacher turned gamekeeper telling us how you could be sipping pina coladas, but you're here to save everybody, and the solution is greater taxation, and you are being pushed onto every trading platform with your cockeyed, badly explained, badly thought out, that even a wealth tax taking 10% off all billionaires, centimillionaires, right down to 10 million, wouldn't pay for the functioning of the UK government for much more than 6 months. That is how you so don't understand. Never mind the fact that they would all then move. They would only keep branch level staff here, and all the employment that they did generate apart from branch level and a couple of administrative office would all disappear and leave Great Britain, leaving it far the poorer for a once-off heist that wouldn't even cover the costs of running the country for 6 months.
Fair share for ordinary working people, and I know we're losing the argument, and I know that Farage will win, and I know that Trump will win, and I know that things will get worse. I don't think I'm going to win.
So if you know you're promoting a strategy that is not going to work, and it sounds like you think is incredibly almost impossible, then why would you not be more practical in your solution?
Stephen, if it was impossible, I wouldn't be here.
So you think it's possible?
Of course it's possible. Of course it's possible.
But you believe you're not going to win?
I'm a betting man, Steve. I'm a betting man. I put my bets on. You know, I am. If I get okay, so my YouTube channel is growing really, really quickly, and you know, I'm obviously starting a bit of a movement, and there's a lot of political support. And if it keeps growing, we'll get more political support. At the end of the day, I'm trying to tax the richest and most powerful people in the world, and most of these people will come out and attack me, and they'll try and stop me. And
why do you never mention the Rothschild cartel? Why do you never mention the Rockefellers? Why do you never mention the long-standing European families of multi-generational wealth? If you did any degree of study, you would know the richest person is not elongated muskiness. It is not Bill Gates. It is not this current generation's crop of people. Why do you never ever mention the fact that all the trillionaires and their vehicles like Vanguard, BlackRock, etc., are busy buying all the homes that you find are too expensive for your teacher to not be able to afford? Why do you never mention those corporations, Gary, if yours is a legitimate movement where you are truly attacking where all of this comes? And why is no one else in this debate bringing up this fact?
I do not have billions of pounds, hundreds of millions of pounds to use to support my YouTube channel. I'm counting on ordinary people
You're
like you to
millionaire,
share my message. Now listen, for most of history, that has not worked. And for most of history, ordinary families live in poverty. I don't think it's impossible that we ordinary people can win and get a fair share, but I think it's worth fighting for, Steve, so I fight for it anyway.
He's right that for most of history, you've had the super elite and then everyone else is down here. And it's massive wealth inequality is almost the normal for the last 5,000 years. And almost everywhere, you've got kings, queens, dukes, and peasants and serfs down there. There have been economic situations that have been different. Dubai is a really strange situation. It's a desert. It's inhospitable to live in. It's the last place in the world most people would think or choose that they would want to be. And yet it's one of the most economically rich places in the world right now. They actually didn't start with oil wealth. They were able to borrow money to build Dubai. But the low tax environment has now attracted some of the world's most talented people to go and build technology companies there. And I don't know, have you been there recently?
I've been to Dubai, yes, years ago now.
So at the moment, it is the most thriving entrepreneurial community on earth outside of the US, but probably even rivaling the US. That there are investors, there's entrepreneurs, and the wealth is going through the roof. I've got two friends who are personal trainers, fitness.
So our current theme that we said is that the entrepreneurship that you saw in the Californian garages, now that California has become a very high tax, very bankrupt place, you're going to see higher skill sets slowly dissipating, leaving California. You're going to see them end up in the Middle East, as we have said, places like Dubai, Qatar, the fork of the Chosen One chain, and in Singapore, where there is low tax generally by policy and an friendly work environment. It's quite easy to get talented people to move. You make them unwelcome. You reduce their income, you tax them, you put hobos that will knock them out and rob them for their watches, etc., on the streets. And very quickly people decide they'd prefer to live, they'd prefer not to be mugged, they can go somewhere else, they can keep more of their money, and they will move. This is part of a migration that will affect America too, although it's already affecting the UK, and California is that one step with its cultural Marxism and its peculiar social engineering thoughts and its absolute state level bankruptcy, especially with paying the likes of $750 million to one company in carbon credits based off of absolutely fraudulent climate change argument. But anyway, let's let him go on.
Trainers. One fitness trainer has decided to stop working more hours because he's hit 50 grand a year and he now gets taxed at 40%. So he's basically decided he's going to earn right up to 50,000 and then stop working. And then the other fitness trainer went to Dubai, launched an online fitness community, and has just bought a $350,000 Ferrari. And one entrepreneur is super pumped and super excited about building a business because he's not overtaxed. The other entrepreneur has literally said, I'm not willing to do this because of how much I have to pay.
Just want to be clear, I've always campaigned for lower taxes on working people. Always. So,
But here's the thing, right? If I was to ask you, you've just become one of the best-selling authors in the country. If your publisher came to you and said, because you're in the top 1% of our authors, we're going to halve your royalties if you sign a second book with us, you wouldn't sign a second book with them. You would go to another publisher who says, we'll pay you more royalties because you're so successful.
I would have written this book for free then. I would have written this book for free. In fact, the first time I got offered a deal, I said, don't pay me in advance.
Then give your royalties away.
Why?
Well, because if what I'm saying...
Fine, I'll give my royalties
Oh, you
away.
would have done it for free, but then you won't give your royalties away. Oh, that's a good question, actually. I'd do it for free. Okay, give all the money you got away. No, now that I've earned it, I did earn it. Oh, okay, so you never would have done it for free. Because once you got the check, you banked it. It's quite simple, actually. It's quite a normal reaction. But don't do this benevolent, I work for nothing from the sweat of my brow. This absolute fraud detection should be flashing lights. We all work for a fair return for our efforts if we are adding value, and we accept the payment because it's good for us. And if you're honest, you admit that.
Wait,
No, but I'm
I'll shut
saying-
my YouTube channel down.
No, but
I'll stop
I'm
working.
saying we respond to incentives that if your publisher, if Penguin came to you and said, book number 2...
You see, he even said you'd stop working if he shut his YouTube channel down. Oh, but you're here just for the cause. You're doing this for the people, Gary. No, you're not. We all like to get paid. Thank you very much. Utter bullshit.
you get half royalties because you're in the top 1%. Would you sign with Penguin or would you
I
go with
walked
someone
away
else?
from a £2 million job a year to run a YouTube channel. Do you think I do the work that I do for money?
I'm not talking about that you do it for money. I'm just saying if you had the option to sign between 2 publishing contracts,
Yeah.
right?
You see how he does a straw man argument, and it's always him the hero. I left a £2 million. For all we know, you were fired for being a fool, but you don't know how central banks were doing it. Traders can have a great year and then they can go badly off and then they can be dismissed. I don't know the story and I'm not suggesting I know it, but the point of the matter, stop saying you left working in a high pressure banking environment where you had to put in 14 hours. You did it for us. Let's be frank. Once you've got a certain amount of money, you don't need that BS. You don't need a boss telling you what for. You don't need to get up at 4 a.m. so that you sat at your desk at 6:30. I know how the city of London works. People that are traders in New York know how it works. They were watching the Asian market session on Sunday night. They're in there early in the morning. They eat their lunches at the keyboard. By the time you've got a few million and you've decided you've had enough of that shit and you're burnt out as all hell, you bugger off. It's okay. It's okay to admit it. Be honest. Stop being this knight in shining armor. This is a Sir Galahad syndrome we're seeing here.
Right, and all things being equal, one's going to penalise you for being in the top 1%, and the other one's going to reward you for being in the top 1%. Would you? Of course, you would go with the normal. Like, if all things being equal, you want to write a second book anyway. It's the same for entrepreneurs. When entrepreneurs start companies, we can either start them in high tax economies, or with a stroke of a pen, start them in low tax.
I think
economies.
the rich world is going to have to start rethinking the fact that it allows people, to very, very wealthy people, to own enormous amounts of their physical wealth, go live overseas and not pay tax. I think that.
What? Are you going to lock them in? Here's Gary telling them they won't. The rich world, if you create something and it's of immense value that you've entirely created at an entrepreneur level, we're not talking about some CEO who's a manager who worked his way up and is being paid billions. That's perverse to everyone, to me as well. But you've created a business. You get to say where you want that business to be based. It's part of your right. It's yours. If you're having a child, you get to determine where it gets born. If you choose to leave and fly and have a child born somewhere else or to travel somewhere else, since when do you have a guy that actually is talking about curtailing your freedom of movement in the name of tax extraction for a shit country that is chasing shit tax policies. And I'm afraid to say the UK is fitting that bill right now under Starmer. I have an English father. I am not crapping on my English brethren and friends watching this right now. It's lurched for the worse. It's lurched for the worse.
That has to be revisited, for sure. Like, because what you're saying is, I want the benefit of being able to sell to the US market and the UK market, but I don't want the obligation of having to pay US and UK taxes. And you're correct that at the moment, the US and UK governments allow that. And I think that's
The
phenomenally
US taxes you on worldwide income.
Well, only a small amount, right? So I think that
not a small amount.
that the US and UK governments have to stop that. But the way I
It's not a small amount. The first 100,000 is free, and then it's a significant amount. Okay, so if you're a billionaire, the 100k is nothing, and then the marginal tax rates start.
the US and UK governments, and increasingly a lot of global governments, are kind of being brought up by the elites. And, you know, we have Elon Musk is basically the president, right? And we had Rishi Sunak, whose father-in-law was one of the richest men in the world. Like, if you're Rishi Sunak, who, for our American viewers, was our prime minister until very recently, his father-in-law was one of the richest men in the world. He's got £700 million personal wealth. He's going to be making £30-40 million passive income. And you're getting paid 130 grand a year to be prime minister. When you're making policy, do you think, maybe I'll ask my father-in-law it once.
Yeah.
You know, the fact is, what you're seeing here is, you allow the rich, I'm never ever against entrepreneurs.
That's a fact of corruption. You're talking about a politician that had a huge business, happened to be in the pharmaceutical space while CV19 was happening. How convenient. That's complete cacocracy. It's got very little to do with tax policy. It's got a lot to do with cacocracy. And this is the muddling of arguments and the straw man responses we get out of Gary. No one's ever said politicians aren't corrupt. No one's ever said people with big ass interests in businesses, particularly pharma businesses, shouldn't be bringing major pharmaceutical solutions that everybody is forced to undertake. No one here is happy with that, Gary. Not me, not Daniel, not Diary of the CEO man. And that is a complete straw man. And a misdirect in terms of the discussion we're having. The fact that the Tories were corrupt, there's lots of business people that get into politics to suit their business, is a sign of the failure of a political system, not a free market, small government system.
And actually, I'm not against people getting rich. If you allow the rich to get richer and richer and richer, they squeeze the middle class and they squeeze the poor class out of things like housing, of things like space in cities, of things like energy, and of things like owning a share in government and owning a share in the media.
Do you acknowledge that countries that adopt a anti-rich, big government approach tend to collapse?
Well, like this country in the 60s.
Well, we needed a US bailout. We needed an IMF bailout in 1976.
But the US did the same thing. The US had even higher taxes than us.
We basically, like, you take all the countries where the government becomes big, they meddle with your life, they're involved in every decision, right? Half the economy. I mean, here's one of the things.
This period is not.
Try communism. None of them mention communism. Gary, how did it work? How did it work for Russia? Do tell us. All the Eastern Europeans tried communism. They had it forced on them. Tell us how it worked, Gary. Oh dear, it doesn't work at all. You get bright, smart people that want to be rewarded for doing high-value things. They can't express themselves. They don't get the rewards. They go somewhere else.
It's known as the golden age of capitalism. It's the period of time when...
Which period?
This period 50 years after the Second World War.
Oh, it's the golden age of middle class, to be middle class.
You don't care about the middle class?
No, of course I do. But the 70 years after...
You see, he's just conflated capitalism with the middle-class income. It's a totally different thing. It's a completely different thing. I mean, how do you argue with someone like that? And then he says, you don't care about the middle class? No, we're talking about capitalism, a financial system, and you've talked about an income strata. You don't care about them? It's a bit like me saying, nice donkey, and you say, and you don't care about cats? I mean, what are you?
World War II, where the government sold off all of its houses to middle-class people, so we got housing wealth. But you can only do that trick once, right? So you can only sell off all the houses to everyone once, which is why all the baby boomers own them.
Well, the living standards collapsed after the houses were sold. There was a long period where the houses weren't sold. Between the Second World War and the 80s,
when do you pinpoint living standards collapsing?
Well, I think there's a few, obviously, big moments. I think 2008 is a big moment. I think COVID is a big moment. I think it's the 80s where you start to see the wealth distribution go. What matters is actually the distribution itself. So once you change the tax system, it takes a bit of time for the wealth distribution to change. But once you start, for me, the big thing is the loss of wealth holding. I want ordinary families to be able to hold wealth. And once you lose that, you lose the middle class. And you will not find me a single country in the world now, or the history of the world, that has provided good broad living standards without allowing ordinary families to own assets.
Yeah, I agree. And take Singapore, for example, where everyone's encouraged to own properties. They've got an amazing system in Singapore. They've taken
a massive government, by the way, enormous government.
25% of GDP.
They own all that. They own.
And the British is 45%, going on, it's actually more than 45. It's heading for half their economy. That is absolute socialism, by the way. And it's the most inefficient, the most corrupt, and it's the most slow and bunged up, and it's an absolute beast of a fire that just burns pound notes.
own the houses.
They have a wealth.
They
fund.
own all the houses.
No, they don't own all the houses. They have a sovereign wealth fund that circulates houses through.
They own houses.
They've solved.
Singapore owns the house. They own it. The Singapore government owns an enormous share of the housing
The UK,
stock. So you think we should own the
owned by
housing stock?
pension funds? People they not force their citizens, but they direct their citizens into home ownership.
So you don't think Singaporean government owns a large share
I
of
just know
housing
that
stock?
Around 80%, so this is the argument about residents live in public housing, flats managed by the Housing and Development Board, with about 90% of those residents owning their, let's see what that says.
The Singaporean government's only 25% of the economy.
But a big share of the housing
so
stock.
75% of the economy is
I would like to
capitalist.
say, by the way, just to be really clear,
I don't actually understand that directory DOAC information. Around 80% of Singapore's residents live in public housing flats, with about 90% of those residents owning their homes. I don't know how you could be in 80% in other people's flats and also
never
90%.
ever once advocated for big government. Never a single time. Never a single
taxes
time.
bigger government.
I want higher taxes on the wealth holders so we can tax wealth creators and working people less.
the only-
I don't want a bigger government.
how
I
do you
want our
enforce
viewers to have more money.
Yeah,
I want our viewers to have more money. And also, I want to tax those super rich so that they stop squeezing ordinary families out of asset ownership.
Just it seems like an obvious solution. It seems like
It's a good solution.
It seems like hey, who's got the money? Rich people.
Not the money, the assets. The
Who's
assets.
got the assets? Rich people. Then let's just take them off them. And
No, I don't want to redistribute. I am the only person on this table anti-redistribution because the redistribution is happening if
No one else has asked for the redistribution. You're not the only person. You're still a socialist, though. You want to tax them out of it.
front of our eyes. The middle class is losing its assets. Government is losing its assets. Those assets are being accumulated by the rich. I want to stop the redistribution. Please, I'm the most anti-redistribution person in this game. We need to stop the redistribution of wealth.
You're talking about redistribution wealth by taxation. It's very, very close, Gary. It's exceedingly close to redistribute and say, I want a postman on his own to have a 4-person family and his own home and his pension gilded for his entire retirement and to be outright owner by the end of his career. You want that, and you want rich people to pay for that.
Wealth away from ordinary British and American families.
So the difference is, for me, it's very simple, which is I really truly believe that free markets and low governments and less taxes creates more wealth in the middle.
And freedom for the heron is death for the fishes. If we have complete freedom, multimillionaires like you and me will get richer and richer and richer every year, and we will squeeze out and we will eat the middle class.
So money flows to those who look after it best. Let's just get this right. Money is like water. It flows to where it is looked after best. People that are often in council homes are the first to have a Sky dish on the side of their house. And what do? They watch a bunch of footy and a bunch of telly. And you know what other people do? They start businesses with that £500. They buy a mobile phone repair kit and they fix 10 of their friends' mates' phones that smash their screens and various other things. And they then get back in couple of £100. Then they do it again. Then they do it again. Then they start understanding electronics. They eventually get a small store or they have a flea market stand. That's what people that really want to advance their wealth truly do. The proliferation of Sky dishes in the working class, council houses, homes turned over to people is absolutely vast. And you know what? It's the same in townships here. You will see shanties and you will see sports dishes for capturing broadcast. If the first thing you do when you get 500 bonus or a little bit of a loss is to go and buy the latest iPhone just so that you can look cool and show social status to your mates, you are not entitled to be rich. You do not preserve capital. You are primarily a consumer. You are not a producer. You have no dreams of producing. You want to consume. In other words, as much money that can be taken from others and given to you, the more you will be able to consume, and you like that idea. Guess what? We all like nice things, but some of us understand you're either a producer or a consumer in this world. This is Gary.
Ask you though, if wealth inequality could be solved, but everyone does worse, is that a good solution?
Obviously not. The whole reason I do this is because I don't want ordinary people to collapse into poverty. This is about people being able to feed their kids.
So wealth inequality is not the problem. It's collapsing
That's
living standards.
quite contorted. Yes, it's quite contorted.
No, but I'm saying-
The problem is
living
It's collapse in living standards, as Daniel said. He doesn't shut up, so you can't even hear Daniel say that. A lot of emotive hand waving, etc., etc. Collapse in living standards is in the collapse of the currency. Again, if you pull up the chart of the loss of buying power, let's do it together because a visual aid sure helps. Dollar loss of buying power to gold image. Let's see what comes up. It's quite easy to actually do this, you know. purchasing power, visual capitalist. That looked a super nice chart, but hey, any of these will do, guys. It's not difficult to see. You want to know why your house, a fixed commodity with standard finishings, sometimes getting even crapper in build quality than some of the things that were made older, gets so much expensive because the dollar you had there, up top there, is now a whole bunch less significant than it is today. Where's that diagram? I truly would like to see it, but it's not going to come. So let's try that one. And by the way, the pound is worse. The pound is worse. So let's be clear. Even if you had property and you could have bought property for, let's just say, $45, you would have been able to buy it at any time during this period and been just fine. And now you would find it exceedingly expensive, the shortfall being that. That is the loss of buying power. That is the loss of buying power. And the reduction in living standards is working people's increase in wages has been significantly less than the loss in buying power of your currency through a coordinated central banker cartel that have actively pursued a policy of inflation, which basically means increasing loans, increasing debt, and proliferating fiat, which is often being misdirected by the government to be spent with status corporations and unicorns. That's why trillion market caps companies are the new norm, when billions used to be large companies when I grew up. That is why, because that dollar isn't as significant, the compound interest of continually proliferating and getting diluted does this to your money. And that is why, again, in this entire discussion, not one individual has brought up but once gold as a standard of measuring the true sustainable value of money. Right now, the currently making all-time highs is gold, is other copper up on a semi-precious industrial, coffee beans. We've kept you up to date with all of this. Cocoa, however you want to say it, Arabica, Robusta, you name it, and it's got to the commodities. So you had hyperinflation in assets first, and now you've got a deleverage. And that's what everybody has a sense of what's coming, the deleveraging of a failed debt system. And none of them are saying it's the collapse in living standards that Gary is actually moaning about, but he just can't seem to find out what did that. He worked for one of the primary dealer banks, Citibank, and he hasn't worked out what did that to the dollar and the pound. He thinks we were taxing people more back here. That means we need to go back to taxing people more so we can feel rich again and we can buy houses again. Wow. I mean, really. And he doesn't realize billionaires, trillionaires, legacy families, they collect the taxes. They don't pay taxes. That's how that system works. That is how it works. And I'm afraid to say it is like debating with a 5-year-old when you have this level of lack of understanding about the financial system. So why is his channel growing so much? A, he speaks to a large normal curve of normies that don't understand finance. And he has a nice message, a message of envy. They should take from them to make my living better. B, he's probably promoted by the open democracy corporation that he works for. And the algo is friendly, is pushing. He's probably got pay-per-click and everything else that every trader is getting it. C, he's the ideal Robin Hood, the guy who made good, who wants to steal from the rich and the poor. It's a manufactured narrative. Only the rich is people like me and Daniel. It's not people like the Rothschild family. It's not really Elon. No one is going to take Elon's money away from him. He doesn't need a salary. He doesn't have to have any income. Warren Buffett even admits his secretary pays more in tax than him. He doesn't have to take an income. He has just extreme valuation and a far more tax effective way of taking a dividend out of a corporation than his poor salary wage slave, which should tell you all: build your own businesses ideally, or accept that you're going to pay the tax in the current system unless you can change the game. And that's not going to happen because the people who run this game don't want it to happen and are all like Warren Buffett and Elon Musk and everybody else that won't be affected by higher taxes. But the people that are doctors, lawyers, run small businesses that'll be in a digital system where everything they make has to go for it and cash is killed, will be extracted until they are also reduced in wealth, and all entrepreneurial spirit only comes from the unicorn corporations.
Standards. I am somebody who has made millions of pounds by understanding the simple fact that living standards are falling because of growing wealth inequality.
So living standards, if they were to increase, but they're...
Living standards are not falling because of wealth inequality. That's a different reason, wealth inequality. You've allowed an oligarchical, antitrust, ignored entirely, oligarchical megacorps to crowd out, buy out every small and medium-sized business that could be a threat to them, build massive portfolios that see them absolutely dominate like duopolies in many instances. They're not entirely monopolies, but they're duopolies and sometimes triopolies. They're carving up a market and they're price fixing. And you've allowed that to happen. It's a cacocracy. It's part of fascism, where a government cooperates with a corporation, and Gary is actually complaining about a corporate fascism that has come about without understanding it and wanting to tax people that are in a slightly richer tax band than his working class roots allows.
They were super rich.
Yeah.
Is that a problem?
I think you do need to be worried about extremely wealthy elites. Yeah, I think what's interesting, you look at the founding of the United States. These guys, the founding of the United States conceptually is really based on these ideas of distribution of power. That's why you have the president and the House and the Senate, and you have this independent judiciary. They're like, we cannot allow power to become concentrated, because they came from a Europe which had extremely concentrated power and extremely wealthy elites and extremely broad poverty. So I think that...
Everyone who signed the Constitution but 4 signatures were verified Freemasons. It's not to say the final 4, and I think there's 54 or 56 signatures. Put in the comment below how many people. I think it's mid-50s. It's not to say the other 4 weren't. It's just that they haven't been proven unequivocally that they were. The United States was born with the intent of being a large colony of an empire that would be controlled subtly by the same legacy families, which is why they kept pushing for the Federal Reserve that they got put in 1913 after multiple attempts. And there were people that resisted, and just about every person who resisted as a president ended up being assassinated.
Allowing a small group of society to increasingly monopolize power and wealth over time is obviously something we should be worried about. But
no one has a problem with that statement, Gary. It's your solution, and you don't mention who those people are. To you, it's Elon Musk and Larry Ellison.
Primarily, the reason I worry about wealth inequality is because I see and I bet on and I make money on the fact that it causes living standards to fall.
By the way,
wealth inequality doesn't cause living standards to fall, actually. I don't want wealth inequality to the level that it is in America. I don't think CEOs should be paid 1,000 times more than their lowest shop worker. They're not as gifted as they say. They get plenty wrong. They're just at the top of the ship and make big decisions that can build wealth for a corporation. Professional management is well overpaid in America and even in the UK. But let's not get confused. Living standards failed because the money buys less. It's that simple. Living standards fail because the money buys less, and the rate at which living wages have gone up versus the rate at which proliferation and devaluation of the currency has occurred is extremely different. And they have devalued the currency far faster than normal real wages have grown. That is why. And the difference of those compounding rates when applied over lengthy duration sees an ever broadening expensive existence. And that is why a postman can't, that is why a teacher can't buy a home and live without getting into huge debt and struggling to get a deposit together. However, income inequality causes social unrest. It causes a very fertile ground for envy. It also is part and parcel of those same oligarchical classes that have got scaled to globalized level and trillion market cap without being made to pay proper tax rates. And that is an absolute fact. The fact that Google and Apple can pay a fraction of 1%, those are the things where you should be directing the angry energy, Gary. The megacorps that should have been broken up under antitrust law and that should definitely be paying at least 20 to 30% tax for selling globally in global nations, but that's not happened. And dirty corrupt cacocracy politicians like George Osborne and Labour equivalents have done deals and silently looked the other way, because they are all part of the dark state and the legacy family wealth that need these corporations to data sweep, biometrically collect, surveil and finance you as part of a control grid that is coming in this great collapse, this reset, again a word that none of them mention, that is due to happen. So gold doesn't get mentioned, reset doesn't get mentioned, the legacy family names don't get mentioned at all. People like Elon, a frontman, get mentioned.
I actually really agree with you. And the founding fathers of the US, they did, especially around the 1900s, they did want to break up monopolies. And breaking up monopolies was one of the big things that they did trust busting, where they broke up Standard Oil and all.
Standard Oil actually was Rockefeller money. No one can say it, it seems. They'd used press gang, violence, murder to secure and grow. They'd also used price gouging. They'd secured a special deal with the Rothschild Rail at a super low price so that they could still make money, and dropped the price of oil so that it was non-financially viable and forced others into bankruptcy. Standard Oil is everything that's bad about a cacocracy and has nothing to do with free market capitalism of competition. Rockefeller himself said competition is sin. That's how he played the game. He sought to dominate, and he did any measure to destroy them. That's why in his later life he was walking around looking like the pterodactyl vile man that he was, giving pennies to kids, and started with Bernays the notion of corporate PR as a concept to try rebrand the fact that he was an absolute vampire, a murderer, a thug at every single level, and all his wealth should have been stripped off him. He should have been jailed, imprisoned at every level for the violence that he brought about in the industry. And further to that, when they broke up Standard Oil, all they did, he didn't lose ownership in it. All they did is created a multitude of new brands in oil. And in fact, if you read and watch Corbett's report on Standard Oil and the breaking up of Standard Oil, he actually got wealthier, because once they were treated as different corporations, Xenon is not, Texaco, which is not, Mobil, not this, not that, all these brands coexisted. He went even further up the wealth tree, because their market caps, once separated, increased, because now we have a really valid oil industry. So in fact, Rockefeller got richer in that process, and then went into the pharmaceuticals, which led to where we got in 2019 and every other pharmaceutical crime that has been done with the help of Carnegie, and is even a big driver of the green revolution that sees the Tesla frontman getting carbon credits from the state of California, which is killing the dollar, that is diluting and bankrupting that state, all being paid to their frontman running a battery car, an iPhone car solution. Anyway, back to that. You won't hear any of that here.
All of those sorts of things. One thing I do really see happening at the moment is that we have a stupid, outdated definition of monopolies, where we use monopolies the same way they used it when they had the oil companies that owned all the oil. In the technology world, a monopoly is formed through an ecosystem. So Amazon, for example, owning AWS and Audible and this and this and this and Whole Foods, it creates a fortress that's almost impossible to compete with. And Google owning YouTube and Gmail and all this, they create these fortresses through ecosystems. One of the things that I do think we need to look at is compulsory breakup of big tech once you hit a certain time, because it's very difficult. Because, do you know, billionaires have two big fears, right? Keep them up at night, having nightmares. Number two is high taxes. Number one is that startup entrepreneur who disrupts their business, and they want to kill that early. You know, Steve Jobs at 24 years old disrupted IBM, and Jeff Bezos disrupted Walmart. So they are terrified of entrepreneurs in the middle, and they want to create government regulations to say, hey, you know what? Let's cap entrepreneurs at 10 million. You can get to 10 million. It's okay for us. We're way past that point. But Gary's our guy because he's going to cap everyone.
I never said cap anyone at 10 million.
Yeah, he's been called out for being that guy because they don't want competition. They build walls. Once you have a huge monopoly, you destroy competing products. You buy them, you bury them, you don't promote them, you let them wither on the vine. It's part and a cost of business. Innovation gets destroyed by big corporates. The biggest innovators are small and medium enterprises. But as Daniel fails to say, when you break up industries, if the owners continue to own the separate brands, you don't stop monopolist behavior. They should become forced sellers and should lose their entire interest in that. And a different operator should be put in. But of course, that would lead to corruption and co-option. And what we're realizing is that the political classes are imminently corrupt, and big money can buy the justice they want in these monopoly situations. And you never get around that. So you better understand the game, understand how it works, learn and play, because human nature isn't changing, particularly at the top end of the psychopathic legacy family money managers. The Pharisees, the usury lenders in the synagogue are live and kicking, baby.
By the way,
Because when simple happen, people stop. As soon as you have wealth taxes, people just give up. They just
So you telling me our viewers, if they knew they could build a 20, 30 million pound company,
sounds
but they
ridiculous.
knew they would have to pay 20. If you're worth 30 million, 1% above, it's 200 grand a year. So if I said, if you can have 30 million pound company,
To traders stop.
just bear in mind, right, you make 5% a year on your wealth, right? So if you've got a 300 million pound company, you're going to be making 15 million pound a year. And I'm turning to you and I'm going to say, you've got to pay 200 grand a year on your 15 million pound revenue. And they're going to say, you know what? I'm not going to start a business. I don't want to be worth 30 million quid. This is ridiculous. Nobody is going to say, oh my God, I don't want to be a multi-millionaire because in 20 years' time, I'll have to pay 1% taxes.
But most traders are earning what most people earn in a lifetime. Traders can earn
Nobody said that, Gary. Nobody said they wouldn't pay 1% after 20 years. And that's not your policy either that you're proposing.
in a year. Most traders don't stop.
No,
right?
talk about that a lot,
right? So most traders just keep going. Entrepreneurs are the same, that they're motivated to keep going. But when you have wealth advisors and investors saying, do not build a company in the UK because they're anti-wealth.
Listen, I'm not trying to make the UK anti-wealth. I'm not trying to make the UK anti-wealth. I think the UK and the US.
Everything you're suggesting is making the UK anti-wealth. How you cannot understand that is beyond me.
Need to be looking at a situation where you cannot allow people who own enormous businesses that sell to your country to live in Dubai, to live in the Cayman Islands and not pay tax. And I don't.
So nobody can buy an imported product in Gary's world. You can only buy products in the UK. If it's not being sold by a registered UK company, you can't buy it because you might be making money. That would mean Apple would have to have a special corporation with a separate brand in the UK. Everybody will want it for the UK market, or the British would have to form their own companies and sell them all their own businesses. You want a BYD that China makes in Beijing. You need a Brit to copy everything that BYD does. Forget about the scale that they have, where they have virtually the size of a city, in a massive city, to get to those prices. You, Gary, think someone's going to be able to replicate that product as a British entrepreneur, and he's going to do it, and he's going to pay the 40% tax that he's going to have to pay on his income, maybe 45. Actually, he's going to earn even more in due course. It's going to be scavenged on his personal income after paying a corporate tax, all to do this all in the UK without the scale of China to deliver a looky-likey product that someone might have wanted from China. Good luck. You don't understand business at all, Gary. There's nothing sensible coming out of your gob.
I don't think that's a controversial position.
I've got a question for both of you, which is if you
It is a highly controversial position. It's completely nonsensical. People in the UK can only buy from UK corporations. I've never heard anything so fucked up stupid in my entire life. Just imagine that. Most of what British people use every goddamn day is made in a different company. Bosch washing machine, Samsung device, Samsung TV, Hyundai car. You'd all be driving bloody Rovers and no-name brands that we're yet to have for just your kitchen and home appliances, Gary. There's so little manufactured in the UK that to say that is idiotic beyond the point of absolute stupidity. My IQ just fell 40 points hearing you say that utter gibberish.
are a young person and you're 18 years old now, and that you're listening to this, but your objective really is an individualistic one. You want to get rich and you have a great future for you and your family, like all of us have been able to do. What would your advice be to them, Gary, at this moment in time?
This is such a hard question. I know Dan's angry at me for what I put in my video, How to Get Rich. Somebody came around to my house and asked me something. Obviously, I get asked it a lot because stupid.
Now you're going to have a long-winded story about somebody bawling in tears and how hard it is and how it's finally someone who told them that it's not their fault that they haven't got rich and it's the system's fault and etc, 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 etc. Let's skip forward.
For the people that don't know, I'm by blood half Nigerian. I would say to them that knowledge is really your life raft. So obviously there's a big tech boom happening in Nigeria, which is liberating a lot of people from that situation. So I would try and tell them to...
There is this thing called remote foreign workers, and this is a huge boom. And the economic
So the kids should move to the Philippines then. It's great. You get a great quality of life in the Philippines. When I looked at the slums of Manila, they should just get jobs. I don't know why they're not getting their laptops out. The
the
poverty in the Philippines is horrific. Listen, Philippines is a beautiful country, an amazing country. I love the Philippines. I've been a
money's
number of
flowing
times.
in there at a rate that's
But
never
what
been.
is the life like for your average Filipino?
Well, would you agree though that their economy is just getting flooded?
So because the average life is bad for the Philippines, you should stop all that foreign money, that nomadic worker and all those employees who could actually employ some of the better workers that have a bit of brightness that could be brought into a mobile nomadic capitalist business. I mean, I don't even know what this guy is actually putting forward anymore. The fact that there's extreme poverty in the world doesn't mean that it's a failure to have nomad capitalists come to your country, start employing people. Pointing out that there's extreme poverty. It's actually going to improve that, Gary, but you want to stop it.
Flooded with money at the moment. Like, money's flowing in there.
Money is flowing in, but it is not giving a good quality of life for your average Filipino.
That's not true.
No, it's absolutely not true. It's absolutely not true. Everyone who gets recruited will be getting a better job than the guy who's planting rice in some rural area and basically eats a bowl of rice every day, backbending work every day. He now can get a job doing something better. Or the nomad capitalist wants a back massage and now there's a masseuse, or he wants to go eat out and now there's an extra chef needed and there's an extra waiter. Those are all better jobs than extreme and abject poverty. And Gary doesn't want it. Gary doesn't understand the world of economics at all. He puts himself forward as a rebalancing economist. I don't know if he has any qualifications. I don't hear that he's done a business degree. Not that universities can be relied to pass on the reliable information at all, but you at least need to understand what the original hypothesis is, at least as it's presented through textbooks. There's no clarity that he has even that.
Foreign workers.
Well,
remote foreign workers.
Ask Filipino viewers to tell us what's that
remote
life
foreign
like for
workers
the average.
can actually often support their
We can have
entire
a look.
family.
I don't know what the average wage is in the Philippines.
Just to bring it back to this point, though.
He's going to keep interrupting and it's very hard to hear and make out. He doesn't let Daniel talk and he talks over him quite a lot, just throwing a weight of questions so you can't actually deal with his hypothesis. He's trying to say that capital inflows into Philippines is bad and you do know how tough the living is in there. Well, it only gets better with new capitalists moving in there and employing people, Gary. It doesn't get worse. I'm sorry.
No, so I wanted to say from Gary, he said work hard if you're a young guy listening to this now. I was reading this really interesting article yesterday from I think it was from a major newspaper talking about the Lost Boys. And it goes to show that I think it's 1 in 7 young men that is at a working age now are out of work. So there's lots of talk around young men in particular and how they're struggling. You'd say work hard, Gary. You'd
Work
say
hard, no Balenciaga. But the big thing is recognize the situation that you're in. And I would encourage them to support my work and follow my channel because the lifeboats are shrinking. And trust me, we're going to get our kids in the lifeboats. We all know that, all right? And if those lifeboats are shrinking, if you don't stop the ship from going down, it is not you and me who are going to...
So it's turned into a pitch for his YouTube channel. Hey, I'm okay. I have a YouTube channel and I pitch and ask people to subscribe too. But what does your YouTube channel, how's your YouTube channel and your solution actually going to deal with the problem? You see, I also have a product. I also tell people that we can help people build wealth and help themselves, not by getting cockholed by some open democracy scam that you're being funded by and pitching the fact that we should put bigger taxes on wealthier people because it isn't the billionaire class that's going to pay that. You don't even understand the problem. It's the destruction of money that sees living standards go down, not the inequality, funny enough, but the people at the very top are part of a cacocracy, corporatocracy, a corporate fascism that has allowed, and that's contributed to the absolute Gini curve being hollowed out, and you can take that up as a separate issue, but you don't seem to understand that money, the buying power of money, has been destroyed by the central banking cartel, the commercial banking cartel, and the primary dealers for issuing of debt and borrowing new money into existence, for which you were a trader with one of those very same primary dealers. So if there's anybody who got to socialize their losses and capitalize their gains, it's you. And I think this must be some form of repressed guilt for having lost your working class roots in this stoic tolerance of poverty and sweat on your brow for meager wage.
They go down. We'll be fine. If you don't fight the political fight, I guarantee you, people like Daniel will.
So you're saying that they should also get involved in the political fight?
You have to. That's what our grandparents did.
And if they want to become millionaires like you and me and Dan.
Oh, it sounds like Dan's got better advice for that than I do.
Okay, well, I'm going to ask that as well. But I'm wondering how your advice ties into sort of like...
So he's dodged the question now by saying better advice than what I do. How about you advise them to understand the real game, the destruction of money? Nobody's mentioned gold as an investment. Live within your means. Here's a real simple 5-point, Francis on 5. So I'm doing a lot of critiquing and I'm shouting and ranting and pointing out the holes in this argument. What do I say to help people, working class people in Gary's neighborhood in the UK? Here's what I say to you right now. Live within your means. Find a way to maximize your income. It's hard, we all know, if you really want to escape this, you got to work harder. I ran 2 businesses till the one was big enough to pay me a salary that replaced the one I was surrendering. In my nights, on my weekends, I drove and spoke to developers on Saturdays and Sundays. I did phone calls in the evening. I fine-tuned AdWord campaigns at work during lunch hour. I did all sorts of things to try hustle to get a property business off the ground at the same time as holding a 6-digit salary job down, managing. And I got promoted inside of that environment during that period. Live within your means, turn the savings into real wealth building opportunities. That means building a business, investing in things that hold value, not fancy cars that are current assets and devalue. That's why they mentioned Balenciaga. If you do this long enough for 10 or 20 years, you'll be able to afford Balenciaga and it'll be a rounding error. But don't do it now. Conspicuous consumption is not the thing you should be doing. That's why I go back to living within your means, investing in things that grow in value in a reset environment. I will tell you that's gold, silver, and later gold miners. It's quite simple to learn how to buy all those things. We have links in our YouTube at the bottom below, and I didn't even think to mention that, and that's not a sell. Use them or don't. It's entirely up to you. As you are maximizing your income, think about how much tax you pay and how much richer you would get if that wasn't as high. Move to a place that is more friendly, because Gary is busy lobbying politicians to increase that tax on you as a business and on you as someone who's trying to be aspirational. He's going to be lobbying, and that's why he's getting pushed, because the Keir Starmer government absolutely wants to go into scavenge mode where it takes wealth taxes, unrealized capital gains taxes. You are in a downdraft environment. You never participated in the financial leveraging where the assets climbed, and now you're going to have to deal with all the repercussions and the spiraling in of it being unwound. That's why you go where you're being treated best. Go where you're treated best. Start an online business, draw income from across the world if you can. Otherwise, do something that is scalable in some way. These are all key aspects of what you should do. Believe you can better yourself, and you will. Apply your mind to learning and growing and reading. Nobody was born with a certain amount of knowledge. They acquired it through work and effort. That is what Gary should be telling the working class kids to get out of their mire. Go where you're treated better, invest in things that go up, live within your means, upskill yourself so that you can do higher value add things, scale and develop a business. That is what I'm not hearing from either of them, to be honest, in a very clear manner.
The young person who's trying to liberate themselves from where you came from or where I came from.
You know what? I don't think I'm the guy to say that, man, because, you know, I had this unusual gift from a young age. I was very, very, very good at maths, and I just followed that. And you know,
It didn't transfer your maths gift into economic understanding, I'm afraid to announce, Gary.
You know, my sister, she's a poet, and she wrote a really successful grime musical about Dizzy Rascal's first album, all right? She comes from obviously the same family as me, poor family. She worked so hard. She worked so hard. 2 degrees. She can barely pay the rent, all right? So I don't want...
Sorry, Gary. Having degrees doesn't make you valuable to society. Writing poetry for rap artists doesn't make you valuable to society unless lots of people validate that by throwing money at you and saying, that made such a good rap for us in the record industry that we should do it. Gary's making a case for his super talented sister that's living a really tough life. Gary, maybe you should give her some of your ill-gotten gains by being part of the cartel that has devalued the money and benefiting immensely throughout the subprime crisis, while that same bank got subsidies and socialized all their huge losses and privatized all their huge gains. Maybe you should be making a much bigger contribution to those nearest to you. But poets, I'm sorry, rap lyric writers are and art degrees are not anything of value unless you do something with them that other people are prepared to pay for. And I'm afraid I'm not seeing any evidence of that. That's why she's struggling. She needs to do something. There's the Venn diagram. What can you do that you love? What will people pay for? And the area of what can you scale and do that you have competence in. You need to find that point in between where you find people that will pay for that which you do. You have the skill sets and love it sufficiently to do it well, and most people spend their entire life never playing in that area. I have people that were, very physical guys that were in the army with me, that did special forces, and then went and had careers in accountancy and hated it. Well, it was the wrong choice. It was the wrong goddamn choice. They needed to do something they were more passionate, more outdoor about. They weren't passionate about keeping books and record keeping with numbers when they'd had the excitement, the adrenal joy that they got out of being physical. And people have to accept their life will be a function of their choices, Gary. And your sister is making crap choices, or she needs a way to find value add in that which she's doing. That means she needs a contract, she needs an agent, she needs people to get her properly paid if she's doing such awesome, talented, hard work. Toil doesn't get you paid well. Toiling, sweeping the street outside non-stop, starting at 4 a.m. and brushing all the dust, doesn't matter. Cars are coming all the time. New dust will arrive. It's not high value. I'm not going to pay a lot for it, Gary. I'm sorry. It's just the way of the world. Value add, real value add. You get paid for making a real value add to somebody's life. What is she doing that's value add? I didn't hear a goddamn thing. I heard grimes and rhymes and rap.
I want to turn around to our young kids and say, well, I've got this talent, follow your talent. Because it doesn't work, Stephen.
True.
It doesn't work.
Yeah.
Following your talent doesn't work. Wow. What advice. What advice to give young people?
Wait, my sister does great work. But financially, for young people, following your passion, following your talent, unless you come from a rich family, realistically.
It's got nothing to do with a rich family. It's finding a way. I'm passionate about what I do. It pays me exceedingly well. I had to find a way, and I never came from a rich family. Daniel did the same. Diary of the CEO has done the same. There's lots of people that do it, and we hire people and we pay them.
Very, very rarely works. And I know it worked for the three of us at this table, but let's not pretend that everyone experiences the same things that we experienced.
It's not our duty to ensure that everybody is successful. All businesses don't win. I had businesses fail on me. I had businesses here that I attempted in South Africa where I wasn't clearly passionate enough or smart enough or mature enough, that I tried little like on the side hustles that never really got off the ground until I got serious, until I really decided it. You've got learning to do, Gary. We've all got learning to do. You need to learn economics. Not everybody gets to make it. Not everybody wants to be an entrepreneur. They will get according to the decisions they make and the value add they make in society.
What would you say to that, Dan? What's your answer?
I think there's two economies going on at the moment. There's a dying economy, which is the industrial revolution economy, and that is all the office jobs and the factory jobs and all of that sort of stuff, which is very much being automated away and moved to globally. And at the same time, there's this new bubbling up digital economy, which I call the entrepreneur economy or the digital economy. Both of these economies are kind of coexisting. One's going like that, one's going like that. And if you want to be economically successful, you need to stand next to the biggest piles of money that you can. Unfortunately, being a poet doesn't pay a lot of money. We all know that. That's not a surprise. If you came from a very rich family and you were a poet, you'd probably be one of the 60% who fell out of a rich family as well. If you want to be economically successful, you need to say, what is the thing that's economically booming right now? Gary saw the finance industry at that particular time, but if we actually look at the finance industry now, it's in decline, and trading is being replaced by AI robots. People who worked in your career are going to be replaced by...
Not true. Trading is not being replaced by AI robots. Are there more robots available? More than you've ever seen. Are they that awesome and effective and printing money? No, they're not. No one's cracked the beautiful code, the perfect line of code that will always make you money. Unless you're an insider, you're front running. There's mainly corruption surrounding around that. The markets are inherently unpredictable. And even a system in AI code that works for a while will suddenly stop working because it's optimized for one set of market conditions and it will no longer. It's a bit like saying I'm riding through Death Valley in a straight line and therefore all of the future roads will be in a straight line, and the very first bend that shows up I go hauling right through the barrier into the desert. I'm sorry, there aren't even AIs that will take trading. I think trading will be one of the last things that will be affected by it. A discretional trader with a good system will actually do very well. But good luck with all the AIs. I'm not sitting here in fear that an AI is going to stop. I'm actually expecting more of my patterns to occur as a result of AI behavior.
IT systems that basically do similar jobs. It's going to be, these things happen. We're going through a massive technological change. But at the same time, it's never been easier to learn skills for free on YouTube. It's never been easier to join communities where you can get mentoring and get support. There are communities of angel investors who do invest in startups. It's never been cheaper or easier to start a company. There's never been more software and technology to scale and grow. In a short space of time, I would say do what Gary's done. Gary publishes online. He's built a personal brand. He's attached it to a recurring revenue model. I
also work for free for 4 years. I'm not sure how replicable that is.
So build a personal...
Gary, you have to do something productive while you're working for free. I had 3 YouTube subscribers once in 2009 as I started the channel. There was no ads, there was no anything, but I did it because I was passionate about doing it. And I did other things to earn in the meantime. I lectured on trading in academies as a consultant. I went and hustled. I worked. And I'm not even special. I'm just plain ordinary. There's a lot of people. You've got to do something for free for a while if you're really passionate about it. That's why one of the Venn circle diagrams is, do you really care about it? You need that early feedback. You need to build skills. My YouTubes were atrocious. I didn't deserve to be paid for them. I didn't know how to use Camtasia. My audio was crap. Everything was crap. But guess what? Only 3 people suffered, until it was 5 people, until it was the first 100, and slowly I got better. And I read the comments about how crap I was, and slowly I got better. Just like you, Gary. Only you seem to have a very friendly algorithm. You're going to 1 million just about. Good luck to you. Why don't you monetize it? Why don't you show people you can build a business? This man is busy telling you how.
Personal brand, attach it to a business model that is where money's flowing. These are positive things you can do. We all have to play the cards we're dealt. You can always find someone who's done better with better cards, or someone who's been dealt better cards, and you can always find someone who's been dealt worse cards. No matter who you are on the planet, there's someone better, there's someone worse. You have to play the cards that you're dealt. You cannot sit around waiting for the economic system of the world to be changed. You have to say, you know what? These are the cards I was born at this particular time, in these circumstances. These are my strengths, these are my weaknesses. I'm going to play the cards that I've dealt. Personal agency is what gets people.
That's basically taking control over your own outcomes that Daniel is talking. What he's also not said in all of this is learn to understand the game of money and work, because actually this is about money. Money buys you freedom. Building wealth buys you freedom. Gary was lucky to get his because he got the seat in one of the oligarchical monopolies and got to leverage their balance sheet, and then got to keep the money he made in a socialized cost versus a privatized profit system. Daniel has made it out of his own in the economic entrepreneurial environment, and I consider it probably more noble in all intents. And I really think Gary seems to be talking out of his guilt as a working class hero, some form of toil and poverty guilt that he actually got to make it so good when he sees his sister struggling along, but not realizing that what she's doing actually isn't big value, isn't perceived as big value.
To feel good about their life, to make progress. And as soon as you play the victim mindset, as soon as you say, oh, you know what, the answer to all my prayers is Gary's going to change the system, you're in serious trouble.
Could I just say one thing back on that? If we become a society of individuals who think only individually and never consider broader societal problems, we will become a society that becomes unable to fix societal problems.
We aren't becoming a society of purely individuals, but when it comes down to your own outcomes, that is 100% an individual matter. We still recognize that we function in a system and that there are other people that need to be respected, supported, helped, potentially given jobs, worthy people, but they must still serve a larger value add in our business, in our life, if they to go forward. If you do not take a certain amount of individual responsibility, you do not have a society. Then you have Bolshevik communism, where an incredibly talented scientist that's creating huge new groundbreaking technologies that lives on his own, lives in a 1-bedroom flat, and a family with a street sweeper, for example, that has 8 children, lives in a much bigger apartment on account of need, not merit. And who is making the greatest value add, the quality difference, life-changing systems, biggest contributions in society? You will end up with a Bolshevik communist system under Gary. That is where it ends up. And even if he says, I'm not for that, it's not starting, it's where it ends up, Gary. Once you start down that road, you don't come back down out. It's kind of like a ratchet. You can only tighten it. You don't get to pull your hand out of the mincing machine. When you suddenly realize it's not so friendly, there's not a pot of gold in there, there's a mincing machine mincing your fingers. You don't get to pull it out. It pulls your entire arm through. It gets pulled off at the shoulder joint. You don't get to reverse out of it once you start down that path.
I'm somebody who has made millions of pounds betting on the collapse of society, the collapse of the middle class.
So you keep telling us.
I don't want to be giving stock tips on the Titanic, okay? I understand that we live in individualized societies. And
See, that's such a soundbite and a stock tips on the Titanic. First of all, you said you're a bond trader, so we don't know whether you know anything about equities. We've established you know nothing about economics and entrepreneurial and capitalism and transfer pricing for big oligarchical business. You aren't even clear that this is a corporate fascist society, and you don't understand that the value of money has been destroyed by a central banking cartel that you were part of. So let's be clear. We wouldn't take stock tips from you.
To say, hey, you need to protect your society. If you don't protect your society is going to collapse. And the British public...
So you should always be very careful about the guardians of society. We have this in rugby. We listen to New Zealand coaches talking about it's not in the spirit of the game. You have all these people that suddenly become the greater spirit of the game protectors. It's always those people that are actually, those that talk about protecting the spirit of the game seek to control the game. Those people that talk about larger needs of society are there to control society. These are not contributors to society. They are people that seek power over society. Those same New Zealand coaches want to tell you that certain things are bad in rugby. It shouldn't be allowed to happen. It's not in the spirit of the game. Actually want the rules changed that better suit their playing style. And that is how people like this, we are all responsible for society, but it starts with the individual making a valid contribution to others. That is the beginning. Each cell has to have a purpose. We can't carry a lot of cancerous, dormant, non-productive cells. That is a cancer body, Gary. And you're a promo. The communism, Bolshevik communism is a cancer.
The American public have a choice to make here.
What would
I'm
that
here
look
to
like?
protect these
What do
viewers.
you want people to do?
I want them to get involved with, watch my channel,
But what is-
subscribe to my
so what's
channel
your content?
on YouTube, Instagram, TikTok, share it with your friends, share it with your mum,
But then what?
understand,
Then what?
and then push for change.
So he talks about a lot of self-interest here for someone who's really in it for all the people. He's told everyone to subscribe. I don't tell people to subscribe anymore. On our edit, it'll have the subscribe button. I don't even ask people. I hate Diary of a CEO. I get so annoyed with that insert saying only 47% of you have subscribed. I refuse to put them in my channel. If you don't want to subscribe, you don't have to. This guy's pretty good at mentioning subscribe and follow my channel. He's very good at wanting to pump his growth numbers. Maybe he understands a little bit more about what Daniel was teaching him as a media company and a brand, as the working class hero. And he's jumped on the second life he's getting as a hero recognized that people come up to in the street.
Change. Push for change like our grandparents did.
But what-
Push the politicians
So
to
vote-
tax working people less and tax extremely wealthy wealth holders more.
So vote for the Greens.
Vote for whoever gives you that, whoever gives you your share of the pie. So
basically-
this is
Vote for the Greens. That's actually quite a clever throwaway comment. Higher tax.
not football, okay? I'm not here,
but
Gary
I'm saying,
Stevenson, member of the Green Party.
but ultimately-
I'm here to protect the working class.
So that's their that would be their social and sort of political energy, would be to stand up and fight. But in their personal lives, are you telling them to start businesses, take big risks, work really hard, go for it because they can also...
You know, I would defer to you guys on that. I'm not a businessman. I'm an economist. That's what I am. I made my money by being an economist. I'm a very...
You're not an economist, Gary. Jesus, if there's one thing you're not an economist, bud. You don't understand the destruction of buying power of money. It's literally, to me, it's got to be the debt and fiat system and the buying power of money. If you can't get that, you don't get to sit here. People have gone to universities, got degrees. I've got a master's. I don't talk about it because I actually think academic institutions are not the best place for real learning. They're totally infested with political and malfeasance and everything else. But mate, you absolutely are not an economist. You don't understand the basics.
Very, very good economist. My predictions will be right. People can go and watch my
I'm a
predictions
very good economist because you're predicting that a highly indebted society that has turned the corner in the debt that we never saw you call the debt turning cycle in. Your channel has exploded since August 2020 when we said the debt wheels have come off the bottomless overdraft's been pulled. You're going to see the right sizing of America. You're such a highly talented economist that without giving a date, a month or an era, you're predicting that there'll be a collapse. Let me tell you, everybody on YouTube in the financial space has been expecting and predicting a collapse. Mine started in 1982, by the way, but at least we have technical indicators for when that has started to really have a shoe drop. The gold going up, the end of the debt markets. You've not said any of these things. You've got no detail at all. You're going to call yourself a genius for the last 15 years and an amazing economist because you're predicting a collapse. We're all predicting a collapse, Gary, only we're giving a lot more detail than you. There's tons of people before me. We've got guests like Jim Rogers predicting a collapse. We've had guests like Mark Farber predicting a collapse. We've all been predicting a collapse. There's nothing genius about you and showing up and doing that. The difference is you're being put in front of an audience that doesn't watch the normal financial media, the independent financial media on YouTube that is not captured by Open Democracy, CNN, Fox Business, or any of those places. And you're the first person they hear saying the system is going to collapse. And you're telling them we need to tax the people that are richer than us more.
Beginning of COVID, I predicted the entire COVID crisis exactly correctly in May 2020. This is, I'm good at this.
Gary, we never saw your oil short. We never saw your gold long. We never saw the pipelines or the any of those things. I don't know what you're saying that you predicted the COVID crisis. I've been on YouTube for a long time. There was no one before COVID predicting the COVID crisis. COVID was not even a word that people knew at the time. So these are very vague, broad claims that he's making that I've yet to see. We have a full actual case study, by the way. It's just worth dropping this on everything that happened with regards to the oil short gold long trade, everything we said in 2019 that is actually the prediction of COVID crisis without saying COVID. I should drop this in here in the results. It's a specific case study with every YouTube saying that there's a major demand destroying event occurring because energies are going to drop. We said that when it was $67 that oil would happen. There's the case study. It was an oil short trade. By the way, oil went negative for the first time ever in history, and there was such a glut it couldn't be stored. Gary, we never saw you anywhere near that. We never saw the privatization of Aramco, the Arabs that we covered just before that to make their citizens bag holders. I never saw any of these YouTubes, any of these charts, anything about planes all American, anything with inverted HVF structures that gave stop losses, targets, and real opportunity to make money out of a collapse that was being preordained, pre-planned, and prepared. The Aramco drone strikeout was designed to give a final little pop in the oil to flush some shorts out that had already worked it out. The falling wedge, the technical issues, the Carnival cruise liners. Gary, we never saw anything from you. You make such broad claims in the company of people that really did predict this collapse, right down to short time frame charts when the oil started to fall. There you go. Look at that tweet. 7:15 p.m. November 29, 2019. That began that final bear flag collapse in oil. That was before anyone else saw that the Russians and the Saudis had not agreed and it ended up spilling. All these facts and details. Gary, you are a charlatan for even daring to make that claim in the room around people that have done so much more, documented it, were there before the event, not retro framing all of this from Tullow, oil shorts, everything, why it was going to happen. The only thing we didn't mention is that this was going to be a pandemic. We had all the pieces there, and you're saying you called COVID. I mean, the amount of people that come up with this retrospective horse manure that he's actually so under-equipped for this debate, so under-knowledged, and claiming to be an economist and making such wild, unsubstantiated macro trade calls with no mechanism, no technical mechanism, no reason, all in retrospect long after the event, looking for us all to say, here's the guy who called it just because he said so. This is the typical YouTube after timer that there's such a lot of, and there's so little integrity, so little people that it undermines those that really do, because we're now in a room of 100 people who all called the collapse in 2019 that started with the repo markets that we were actually covering mid 2019 in the individual commodities area. Gary, you didn't. You absolutely didn't. Not in any meaningful way, did you?
And listen, I'm never going to come here and say I'm a better businessman than you. I'm pretty sure that I'm not. I'm a very, very, very good economist. This will happen.
You are not a good economist, Gary. Can you stop saying that?
Is there something that I can do? If I'm sat here listening at home, I understand everything you said. I believe everything you said. I believe that it's going to get worse for me. Yeah. Do you think I should still take responsibility of my situation and fight to make my life richer, better, more successful?
100%.
Okay.
100%. Because you know, and I'm sure you know, if you're average British or American, if you don't do that, you're not going to be able to turn the heating on. You have to do it. And I've never once, I think my opinions are often mischaracterized as being anti-ambition. You've read my book. Do you think I'm anti-ambition?
No.
Oh, well,
You don't talk about it, Gary. You don't talk about it, and you actually you tell everybody they're a victim of environment. That you're giving them the excuse to fail. That's not being pro-ambition, Gary. It's not pro-ambition to say there's no point in trying unless we get this political thing, unless you subscribe my channel and get political pressure group and go lobby and riot in the streets. That's how you're going to get real change. The whole entire system needs to change. Your entire job is just to fight for the system change. You're not going to get the billionaires and trillionaires handing over their cash, Gary. It isn't going to happen. The rules of the game is that they wrote the rules for the game, and you aren't going to get to change them, Gary. You haven't understood enough about economics or power or history to even understand that much. But you're going to have people wasting their time building signs instead of building businesses, and you're going to tell me you're pro ambition.
but my tits off to make money, and I want every single young person in this country to be able to make money if they want to, if that's what they want to work towards. But we've created a society where it's almost impossible for young. Listen, I've been there.
If that's what they want to work towards, every person should actually seek the validation of being paid for something, for proving that they're doing something valuable in the world. One of the key things is your value add is determined by other people being prepared to part with money. Just to feel like a valuable member in society should see you be validated at least at one point. That was the one thing that housewives never got credit for and don't get in a traditional society. And let me say that's one thing that I always feel they should get. How's it an if? How's it even an if?
I've been at LSE, I've been at Oxford, I've been in the city, I've been in the media, I've been in politics. All of the guys at the top are a bunch of rich idiots. We are not allowing these...
Gary, you're a rich idiot. You're a rich idiot from a working class background. They're just rich idiots from the tough background. That's why you hate them so much. This is class war 101. You're both idiots. You're both rich. And somehow it happened anyway. Yet you refuse to really push ambition and give the real rules to help people change their life.
Smart kids from ordinary backgrounds to get into those spaces. Why do we pretend we're not doing that? We're not doing
I
that.
disagree with that. You're talking about two types of elite spaces. Elite space of elite universities.
Yeah.
And you're talking about the elite space of derivatives trading. There's the real economy,
Yeah.
where entrepreneurs do their work. Then there's the first derivative, which is the banking system. And then there's the second derivative, which is rates traders like yourself, right? These are places that normal people don't want to end up. Most normal people who grow up in normal households don't wake up one day and say, I want to be a rates trader on a double derivative of the economy making bets. Most people want to start a business that employs people and they want to grow that business and be successful.
Do you think that starting a business is a realistic, higher success probability chance of ordinary poor people becoming rich?
I know that economies thrive when entrepreneurs...
You see, he was all about the society, but he doesn't want people trying. So first of all, you will fail. You will fail many times. You fail forward, Gary. That's how it works. You fail until eventually you have a little bit of success and then fail again. And then you try again and you get a little bit more success because you're a little bit wiser and you're a little bit more retrospective and you keep falling forward. The dude who made Kentucky, not that I'm a fan and should be pushing fast food, he actually got his business off and he was in 68 years old, Gary. You see, you keep showing up and you keep trying and you keep proving that you could learn. You should take an economics course. You talked about Oxford and Cambridge. You certainly didn't do economics there, that I can tell you.
Are active, and it's not just the entrepreneurs. They create
Is that a thing that our viewers can do, and most of them will end up rich?
You only need 1% to improve the whole economy.
There's a really interesting stat that says globally around 65% of ultra high net worth individuals are self-made. Approximately 19% primarily inherited their wealth, and about 16% inherited wealth but significantly grew it through their own ventures. So 65% of the ultra high net worth individuals globally are self-made.
That means 2/3 of the people. 2/3, the bulk. Gary wants to punish the 2/3 that built their own value up. He wants to punish them. So this inherited wealth that he's talking is multi-generational. I don't believe those stats. Is around 19%, and some of them got some wealth and grew it substantially. That's 26%. So, you know, the real just trust fund brat is 19% total.
Does that not mean that if I want to become an ultra high net worth person, it's going to come down to...
Listen, we are just come off the back of the golden age of capitalism. When ordinary people, like my dad, I grew up in Ilford. It's in East London. It's a very immigrant area. Most of my friends I grew up with come from Pakistani, Indian immigrant backgrounds. They came over with nothing. They worked really hard. They made money. They had their own assets. We had a period where ordinary people could make money and could make wealth. So obviously we are now in a period where there are rich people who made money during that period. But it's over now.
I'm seeing ordinary people making money all the time.
Okay, so you're telling our viewers they're idiots. Why are they not making money?
I'm not telling anyone they're an idiot. I'm saying
if it's that...
You see, straw man's that. There's always an opportunity. He says the opportunity window closed. It's all over. There's no more new businesses. It's like, do you know there was a law passed that said there's no more new inventions? The patent office is being closed. There's nothing new to be invented. They actually said that. I can't tell you what year it was, but it actually happened. Gary's telling you there's no new businesses to be started. There's nothing. There's nothing you can do that you can form a business that anybody might support you on. There's nothing. That's essentially, he said, that era's over. You know, that thing where you get paid for a service that's useful to somebody. You know, when there's a whole burgeoning new industry. Who wants to understand AI? Teach people how to do AI. Who wants to understand to network digital cameras for security on their house? You can do that. These are all new things that never existed before. They're all new businesses. Gary says no.
That easy? Okay, all right, fine. Go and buy Dan's book, read it, and become a millionaire. Because Dan thinks it's easy to become a millionaire by being an entrepreneur. But I suspect, having not been an entrepreneur, that most of the people who've read your book are not millionaires.
Everything you've touched has turned to gold. You turned yourself to academia, you got an amazing qualification. You turned yourself to banking, you became $2 million a year. You turned yourself to being a writer, you become a Sunday Times bestseller. You turned yourself to content creating, you get 800,000 followers. And now you sit there after all of that evidence
and say it's hopeless and it's useless. But of course, Gary is backed by open democracy. That's what helped make his book a Sunday Times bestseller. It was probably ghostwritten for him by someone, and he read it out or wrote his barbled thoughts out about how the world should work, and somebody wrote it all down for him. This is as every sign of a controlled hangout person who is here to represent as an avatar the frustrated working class male. This is the Alex Tate. Is it Alex? I don't know. The Tate brothers or one of them. Of instead of picking up girls and pimping them out like that fool, this is the financial equivalent of the Tate brothers. And they are absolutely being nurtured as an avatar and should be treated with suspicion. And Daniel's highlighting, you've won at everything, but you're such a loser at everything. It's pointless to start anything, and everything he's touched has turned to gold. I think Gary has friends. I think he might have friends in the banking cartel. His YouTube channel, I don't feel a failure. I'm yet to cross 100,000. This guy's going to hit 1 million before I cross 100,000. I'm sitting on 75, 79,000 that I've worked and earned every one. I should be going, it's been hard and miserable every way. I can't see another point in doing a video. This guy's done 1 million in a year and a half. I've been doing it since 2009, but I keep showing up and I keep being relentless and I fail forward. And Gary's telling you it's pointless. The entrepreneurial age is over. Yet everything seems to work so well for him. Maybe we should be asking some questions.
Say, oh no, it's all over, guys. It's all. I'm smart enough to do it, but you guys are not smart enough to do it.
If you think you can teach, you've got your book. If you think you
so
can
you
teach,
say that you're smart enough, but they're not smart enough.
I wonder if we do have a bit of an education problem at the heart of this, because I was thinking about your sister, and I was like, right, if I was the CEO of Gary's sister, what would I do?
Yeah.
There's 2 things I'd do right now. The first is, okay, what marketplace is really valuing?
How about a short, sharp slap in the face and say, poetry's a hobby, gal. Get a job. Then you won't have to work so hard. Work less, do a job, pay your bills, and write in the evenings. And see, and then look for a better deal. Look to get paid for your work.
An ability to write in an impactful way. Okay, right, you need to start an Instagram page, because I've seen what happened with Jay Shetty. This guy pulling in tens of millions a year because he took nice words that were motivational, poetic, put them on there. And also YouTube needs to get to YouTube, because if she can talk like you, then she's going to do exceptionally well on YouTube as well.
She needs to talk a whole bunch better than Gary. Gary's being pushed. None of his arguments make sense. I'm tired of beating up on him. I'm actually going to close the video up here. I've said everything I want to say. He's clearly being pushed. The level of stupid is so big that the following of Gary is so organically dumbed down that the quality of people, the massive quality of people watching YouTube that are following him, his pitch is perfect for them, which makes me very, very concerned for the future of the United Kingdom, because this is politics of envy that's taking off. This is a guy who preaches the system change more than change yourself. You know, when you start changing yourself, the world around you changes. Run around trying to change this huge mega system without even making a single small change to who you are and what your contribution is to society is the most foolhardy thing I've ever seen. This man is not pro-ambition. He's here to create a disgruntled youth of white working class males that will be ready for rent-a-crowd, lobby action, and will be unhappy, failing to monetize and not going forward. If you want to be part of that, follow Gary's YouTube. He's asked you 10 times in this entire video to subscribe and follow. Better to follow Daniel if you want to lift yourself up. And I've given you the 5 key points for success. I'm done with, I couldn't finish this video. It was too much. It's too much of this emotion, too much of this heated but, and I'm doing this for this, and I could be drinking pina coladas. Too much of this hero, fallen angel that's uniquely talented. There's an ego trip wrapped up in a socialist movement, wrapped up in all sorts of weird false dichotomies, causation versus effect, mixed messages that are going on here. That the fact that this person has become as big tells me that there's a lot of stupid out there, and there's probably a bunch of money pushing it. And that's all I can take out from this. Till next time, catch you later. Thanks for watching.
Tired of profit wipeouts and blown accounts from following trade signal groups and other YouTube channels? Looking for a better way to trade, reduce your stress, and minimize your risk? Become a skilled technical analyst and see the charts and markets in a new light using the successfully proven HVF method by Francis Hunt, while being surrounded and supported by a principled, structured, and experienced community. Enjoy a constructive learning environment while practically trading markets, supported by a bespoke platform run through browser and app, specifically designed to teach and engage you whilst learning and growing as the markets move. This is not a Telegram or Slack signal group. All trade ideas are based on a proprietary technical analysis process honed over decades, which is the HVF method, leading to trade ideas with fast-moving breakouts and tight stops, exact entries and exits, nuanced interim considerations, and ultimately, strong rewards. Submissions are graded and scored by Francis for potential high-quality setups, and we provide bespoke tools to help get the job done properly and with precision. Over time and with focused effort, you'll begin to look at charts and price action just like Francis. Community updates every day by Francis and our 3 webinars a week provide a 360-degree approach, which are presented by our experienced team of trade leaders to spot potential trades. We're a community of self-actualized individuals, spanning the globe and active 24/7, 365. The premium community provides a warm, supportive, and cooperative place for people willing to listen, participate, contribute, and to learn. We've changed thousands of traders' lives. Transform your approach to trading now. Transform your life. Book an introductory call with us on the link below.